All right, we're live. And today we have with us Chad. He's a small or mid-sized miner. And we have our host, Ethan Zerka.
Hey, everybody.
Um, Welcome, everybody. So Chad, I know you've been involved in the Bitcoin space for a few years now. And we just really wanted to understand your perspective about the industry and about the market and what it's like to survive as a small or medium-sized mining operation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I've definitely been through the gauntlet. And so happy to share my experience for other people. And hopefully some people find it useful, especially I think people that are interested in getting into the crypto mining space. I think it's valuable to really be thinking about some things that we can discuss. So obviously the right equipment, the right pricing, understanding, what you're getting into. So before you do it.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Professionally, what do you do? Is this a side job? A hobby?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you go way back to the early days, right? I was like a tinkerer, messing around with radios and early GPS units and the internet and computers, Macs and PCs, dating back to my childhood. But I got my professional start actually quite young. I was working on an AS400 for an insurance company when I was 14. So
Wow.
in between high school or junior high and high school. Yeah, in between junior high and high school. And that kind of kicked off my career in IT. So in high school, in the summers, I worked IT jobs, and then in the evenings, I would work IT for Mayo Clinic. I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, so there's a Mayo Clinic out there. And obviously, I was doing pretty basic stuff. I was doing like printer share setups on NT4 and whatever. But it was, at the same time, very few 16-year-olds are getting that kind of opportunity. And so it was very cool to be so young and being in the IT space at that level. And then I eventually got a full-time job working at a transportation company that started fairly small and grew. Then I got involved similarly in a healthcare company that was very small at the time and then grew. And then at the same time, I'd been moonlighting for other clients. And so I kicked off my company, one of my two companies, the company that we're not going to be talking about, which is B Structured Technology Group, an MSP. So we do IT outsourcing for small to mid-sized companies in Los Angeles. So I've been doing that for 12 years. That's been my primary business. But we won't talk about that any more than that. So that's kind of my background into how I knew about data centers. I've been in a lot of data centers, done a lot of data center work. I knew a fair amount about power, not as much as I do today, but I mean, I'd worked on some decent sized power equipment just because you do when you're doing data center work. And, I knew about servers and graphics processing units and all that stuff just from personal use. So, when I found out about Bitcoin, honestly, the first time I found out about Bitcoin was probably 2013. And I was like, this is crazy. This is not going to work. I was like exactly that case, right? I was like, I saw some guys mining with Bitmain U1s and U2s, right? The USB miners. And I was like, this is nuts. Like, this is not going to work. I think you guys are all crazy. And I didn't.
Do you regret thinking they're crazy now?
I mean, what I regret is I regret less thinking they're crazy, and I regret being less skeptical, right? I feel like generally speaking, I'm interested and skeptical in all sorts of stuff. So, right, like if I love, like I'm a Wikipedia obsessed person, right? So like if I'm like, this is my first time flying on the Dreamliner, the 787, right? I pull up the Wikipedia for the Boeing 787, even though I'm not a pilot, and just like I read the whole page. I'm like, oh, interesting. Okay. What engines are on this thing? I'm just like, I'm always inquisitive and interested about whatever it is that is going on in my life. So I think what I'm disappointed about is less thinking they're silly and more, I didn't do what I normally do. I mean, my normal MO in life is like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, let's be inquisitive and find out about it. That doesn't mean I wouldn't have come to the conclusion, this is crazy, I'm not going to do it. But I wish I would have been inquisitive about it, because when I heard about Ethereum, that's really where this got started for me. When I heard about Ethereum and ETH mining, I was like, oh, wow, there's a second thing. What does this do? And I started reading some articles about Ethereum and about Vitalik and about, you know, a Turing complete blockchain and a Turing complete computer system that's a global computer. And I was like, this is a whole other level of thing. This is really interesting to me. And then I said, but it's all tied back to this Bitcoin thing. So I guess I got to like do some research. So that's when I finally read the white paper. And that, you know, the white paper, I think anybody that spends the time to read it and has some understanding and some time, you know, for me, the reading came fairly easily outside of like not necessarily understanding the math around elliptical curve cryptography. Like I understand how, generally speaking, it functions, right? I'm technical enough to understand it at a conceptual level. So, you know, having read the white paper, I was like, oh, wow. You know, then I wished, I would have read about it a couple of years before, not instead of in 2015, I wish I would have read the white paper in 2013, because I probably would have done something very different, you know, whether it be mining and or buying it or both. But I read the white paper, and then I just went on a tirade, right? I immediately read The Internet of Money, Part 1 and Part 2. I read Mastering Bitcoin, and then I just kind of went down the rabbit hole. Mastering Bitcoin was really, really interesting to me. Really seeing that like the system could work, right? Like understanding the system could work, understanding the roles that nodes and miners played, spinning up some full nodes. I bought a couple just old S3s, not to thinking I was going to make money, just literally to mess around with, right? To understand how they worked and things like that. And built a couple GPU rigs and was just literally, I thought this is just a fun hobby. I bought a couple cheap S3s and some GPU rigs to mess around with. And like, I'm not going to get that involved with it.
You were doing this in your home or in your home office? Or?
I was doing it at my office. You know, it's I probably shouldn't speak too loudly, but like I have about 10 kilowatts here in my space, and it's a full service lease. So, and I mean, I had, when we were doing the build out, I had, you know, just normal IT stuff. Like we're an IT company. So I have a couple like 20 amp 208 volt circuits for servers and testing stuff and spinning up test gear and stuff like that. So I have like 10 kilowatts in the space. And so, you know, that's how I was able to do this stuff, right? It's included in my lease. Like I didn't have to, I'm paying for it, right? But like I didn't have to pay extra for it to mess around, right?
Sure.
That's 10 kilowatts is a mess around level of power too, right? So it wasn't like I had power to scale this thing out, but that's what gave me the ability to mess around without having to worry about the costs, right? I could just I could spin up some stuff here at the office, not a lot, but some stuff, and mess around with it, which is the same thing we do with servers and other stuff too, right? That's why we have the power in the first place. So, yeah, I spun up these ETH rigs, and then, you know, they started making some real money. And of course, I really regret it now. I sold a bunch of Ethereum at like $20. But, you know, it was real money, right? The rigs paid for themselves. I mean, I'm still running one of them. It just hangs out and runs all day, but it's mining like Beam, I think, right now, right? So, but yeah, like, so that's kind of how I got started. And then I got really interested. I got the bug, right? I was like, I really want to do something bigger. And this is where I started making a bunch of mistakes. So your listeners can learn from me and hopefully not make the same mistakes. And I feel like we're going to come into this exact same thing happening all over again, right? I mean, the bull market had started to move again, right? So I had bought some Bitcoin, right? When I read the white paper in Mastering Bitcoin, I bought some Ethereum, I bought some Bitcoin when it was like $380. So, and I still have most, if not all of it. I sold a little bit in 2017, but not a lot. So I've held it all the way through. So I'm a holder.
Wow.
So, yeah, I sold, I don't know, maybe 2 in January of 2017.
Hey, that's still a chunk of change, though.
It's a chunk of change, and I mean the rest of it I've just kept. And the big regret is selling all that Ethereum. I mean, I had like 180 Ethereum. I sold at like $20, and I mean, hindsight's 2020, of course, but like,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the big mistake I ended up making was, you know, I was mining Bitcoin. And I was mining a little bit of Bitcoin. I was mining a little bit of Ethereum. And I was like, okay, I want to scale this out. Like it's profitable, right? And the problem was it was the beginning of the bull run, right? So your profitability on a rig was essentially going up almost every day. Or if you averaged it out at least to the week, it was going up virtually every week because people weren't able to turn on hash power faster than the value was going up, essentially. And I didn't fully understand the market dynamics that I understand today, or really understand the impact of the halvening events. I think looking at like the stock to flow model that Plan B's put together, I mean, I really buy into that model now. I think the supply halvening and deflationary model is going to be something that's going to happen. And I think unfortunately for Bitcoin, I think over the next probably decade or two, we're going to have these boom bust cycles. I'm anticipating another boom bust cycle post halvening, probably in mid to late 2021, which kind of one of the reasons I wanted to get on the podcast was to partially be a warning bell for people that like, hey, when people are selling S17s for $6,000 and they look really profitable because Bitcoin's price is 50 grand and Bitmain can't keep up anymore again, right now, you and I, we all know that we're in a spot where hardware's not moving, Bitmain can't move their stuff, like hash rate's not growing that fast because price is declining. So it's not that profitable. You can still make money mining right now, right? But you have to be really careful. You have to buy the best hardware and put it in the cheapest possible hosting facility you can get your hands on, which is going to be directly correlated to your scale, right? Like at 100 kilowatts, you're going to be at like 8 cents probably, right? 7.5 cents. At a megawatt, you might be able to get down to 6. Right. At 5 megawatts, you might be able to get down to 5.5, you know, depending. Right. And so your level of investment is going to be directly correlated to how profitable you can be. The word of warning, I think, is we're going to have another cycle. I believe, this may not happen, but I believe we're going to have another cycle. And I think the smart money is going to dump their gear, which is essentially what happened to me the first time around. Right. Like I bought the gear that was getting dumped. Right. Like I bought the S7s and the S9s and the Dragonman T1s when they were super expensive. And, I bought the D3s. I bought all the stuff that you could spend way too much money on. I bought it all. Like I bought every single piece of it.
Sounds like a very familiar story.
Yeah. I feel like it's a story that's not told a lot, which is why, I thought on your podcast, I thought I could be an interesting and different guest because I know you're going to have a lot of tool makers and you're going to have people selling miners and you're going to have all sorts of stuff. And that's all great. I'm not anti-mining, obviously, because I'm mining, but I wanted to be kind of a word of caution. Like I lost more money 2017 to now than I have like ever lost on a business venture before in my life.
I mean, that's an important warning because if Bitcoin does start taking off and it's getting close to 15,000 and it's holding, people are going to start thinking, oh man, maybe I should have gotten into mining. And what happens when the price of Bitcoin goes up?
Yeah,
well, the price of miners goes back up, right?
That's right. Right. And they start to move too, really fast. So I mean, I see this probably playing out all over again, and that's where I think interestingly enough, I think if people are interested in mining, right now is actually a fantastic time to get in the game. Yeah. Right, like right now now
is in December 2019. If you're watching this video in March, maybe that might not be the case.
It might not be the case, even starting not that long from now. I think obviously the halvening is right now targeted at May 15th, 2020. It'll probably move a few days, but it's going to happen probably sometime in mid-May. And I think we're going to start to see the needle move. Last time we saw the needle start to move a little bit before the halvening, and then it just kept moving through it like for an extended period of time. If you look at the stock to flow model that Plan B put together, you'd anticipate the price to just spike at the halvening. But we know just human nature, market dynamics, that's not going to happen, right? There's going to be other stuff. There's going to be psychology that's going to cause that to take some time. Last time it took about 18 months. Maybe it'll take even a little bit longer this time around. But assuming that those same dynamics occur again, I think you're going to be in the same position where you're going to see really expensive equipment that's going to look super cash flow positive. But if it happens exactly on the same timeline, December 2019, we hit this December 2021, we hit this all-time high. Miners are at an all-time high cost. Power's at an all-time high cost. Everything's crazy, but you can still make money. You can make money at 18 cents a kilowatt hour on a $6,000 S17, and it looks amazing, except it's all going to fall out underneath you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's kind of what I expect is going to happen. So, on the flip side, like if you're really interested in this, now is a great time. You can pick up inexpensive S17Es, T17Es. You can put them in sub 8 cent, maybe even if you're at scale, sub 7 or sub 6 cent power facilities. Talk to Scott, he'll hook you up and, run them. But I think the other thing that I would say as a word of warning, and this is what I think would be an interesting conversation. I'd love your guys' take on it. Is I really question, at least after this happening, especially, but looking at like what Bitmain and Peter Thiel are doing, I think fewer and fewer miners are going to be able to operate their miners by selling Bitcoin for their operational expenses. I think people are going to be using other cash flows to run their operational expenses and just accumulate Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And if that occurs, which I think it's already occurring, but I think it's going to occur more, I think it's going to be really hard for small to mid-sized miners like myself that rely on the ability to sell Bitcoin for operational expenses to be profitable. And I wanted your guys' take on, do you see that happening in the market? Like I've seen a little bit of it, and what do you think the impact on small to mid-sized miners is going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's two different ways that we can look at this. There's the people that have to sell their crypto in order to just even keep them running because they have to pay their hosting bill. Then there's the other people that might have another company or two that they own and they want to offset some of their revenue or profit by sinking some US dollars into electricity costs, right?
Yep.
So it could be advantageous for some people, but it's a different story for everybody. What do you think, Ethan?
Well, before I give my comment on this, I'd first like to thank our sponsor, Novablock. Novablock is a mining pool that got established here in North America in August of this year. And in 4 short months, they've managed to make it within the top 15 of the public pools in the world. They're fundamentally thinking about, how the hash rate needs to decentralize. It needs to move away from China. And they're great supporters of that. They want to give increased transparency to their users and help educate their users on what the best pools are to use.
Yeah.
So with that being said, my thought is supply and demand. So from what I'm hearing from you, Chad, is that, in the future, the people that are mining Bitcoin, they're not going to be readily selling it into the market. And my thinking is, wouldn't that then lower the supply, to the demand? And in turn, wouldn't that actually benefit you as a smaller miner? Because, you're still, having to cover your expenses every month. So you have to pay these bills. But because, the larger mining operations, they're just holding everything. So their supply isn't on the market, and it's your supply that's now available on the market. So wouldn't the prices be higher now for the coins that you mine?
I mean, that's an interesting take. It could restrict, artificially maybe is the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying? Like it could restrict the supply more than the original white paper's intention, right? Like the new halvening is supposed to be 6.25 Bitcoin per block. If those aren't, if some fraction or some of those aren't being sold, then supply is actually even stricter. I see what you're saying. Supply is even tighter than it really even appears to be because those coins are just being held. I mean, I would say we have yet to see that. I mean, I don't know. We saw a run up to 13.5 this summer, and we've seen it decline back down to 6.7K. I think it remains one of the things that I think is hard about the whole market is the volatility of Bitcoin makes it very difficult to operate when you have to sell for OPEX, right? Like in this summer, we were sitting pretty, right? Hash rate was at 70 exahash and prices were 13 grand. Like we could sell everything and do really well. Now at 100 exahash or 110 exahash or whatever it's at right now, and $6,700, even only our best equipment is really making decent money, even though we're at a decent power rate. So I think it's still challenging, because I would say at the very least, if you're a small miner, I think you really have to be prepared when you're thinking about it. Let's say you're like, okay, I want to invest $200,000, I'm a small time miner. I want to invest 200
Yeah.
grand in mining equipment and hosting. I really think what I did wrong, and I think what somebody should do if they're thinking about doing this is look at the electrical cost and say your electrical costs for 6 months are going to be $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
Take 150 for gear and 50 for electrical costs, because you need the ability to sell at opportune times.
Right.
So you need to be able to play with the Peter Thiels and Bitmains of the world without necessarily being able to permanently run off of not selling Bitcoin for OpEx. So, for example, for us, like had I been more intelligent at the start and set aside more cash rather than just spending all of it on equipment because I thought it was always all going to be cash flow positive. I should have had a bigger reserve fund for electricity so that when there were declines like there are right now, like I want to hold it all. I don't want to sell any of it.
Yeah. Like today, if you were with a hosting company and you had to pay your electric bill, at the middle of the month or at the end of the month, for example, today would be a horrible day to have to do that.
Horrible.
I know, because I paid my electric bill today at the hosting company.
Now, some hosting companies are flexible and they will give you a little bit of grace period because they know that, hey, if they want to keep you on long term, then, everybody needs to be profitable. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Chad, about that. And one thing I want to ask you specifically is, how do you do mining? What does your setup look like right now? It sounds like maybe you're doing. You're paying somebody to host your miners for you.
Yeah, am I allowed to name names on here? Name company names, or is that
restricted?
Okay, sir. So I'm mining with Frontier Mining. I've known the guys over there for quite some time. I won't name them individually just in case they don't want to be named, but you can look them up online and give them a call. They're great guys. I also don't want to mention my power rate because that's always a thing. You got to call them and negotiate with them if you want to host with them. But I've had a good experience with them. Like you said, they've been fairly flexible with me. I shouldn't even say fairly. They've been very flexible with me. So, for example, because we are selling Bitcoin for our operational expenses, I was very frank with them. I said, hey guys, all of our old gen stuff is underwater. We're going to be in trouble. Right. So they worked with me. Luckily, I had some new stuff coming in already. So we were able to move enough load around to keep the load fairly static while getting rid of all of our old gen stuff. Right. So all of our old gen stuff are turned off now. So it's turned off.
What has your experience been like trying to get rid of that old gear or sell it to have more money to buy new gear?
Well, I think unfortunately,
I know.
Unfortunately, right now, and I've talked to Frontier as well. They have a lot of, I think I can say this without, they have a lot of people that unfortunately have defaulted on them, right? They have a lot of old gen equipment that is just sitting around, because people just abandoned it. Right? They said, "Oh, it's underwater. I'm just going to go bankrupt and take my gear. I don't care because it's not worth anything." So, it's tough. I've been trying to lower the prices on some of the old gen stuff I have over and over and over again. And the question with all of it becomes: do you wait for the price to rise and sell it? And here I am, wanting to sell some of this old gen gear, whereas I don't, I understand why people aren't buying it, for one. And for two, if you're out there listening and saying oh, wow, I can pick up some S9s for $70. There's a reason they're $70. You're probably not going to get $70 out of them unless you have 2 cent power.
Right.
So, at
that point, really, it's just a game of, some people might think it's capitulation, but it's really just, the old gear is getting purchased by people that have cheaper power or being sent to countries that have lower power.
Iran, North Korea,
Turkey.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. It's been a big challenge to unload the equipment, unfortunately, and that's put some strain on us for sure. And so, unfortunately, we're probably gonna have to unload some next gen equipment too, just to keep everything above board, And again, it all comes down to timing. I don't want to sell everything we've mined, and because then what was the point, right? It was a whole lot of work for no benefit. So
at that point, it's just a hobby.
At that point, it's just a hobby, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough and very, very competitive market, and I think people should understand that. And I'm in it, and I'm really, I'm seriously considering closing up shop sometime between 2020 and 2021. I don't know that I'm optimistic, and I really believe that there's going to be another run up in price, which is going to put me in a position to both sell some Bitcoin at an opportune price and sell equipment at an opportune price and have an exit. Unfortunately, if you look at the whole of Perforo, which is the name of my mining company, it's not unlikely that it's going to make money, unless I hang on to a few Bitcoin and it goes to $1 million in 5 years, it's unlikely that it's going to be profitable, unfortunately. And, I just think for me, it's been a larger amount of work than I expected, even hosting with other people, and not profitable enough. And it's been a distraction from my primary business. So,
Sure.
I think long-term I'm looking to exit. But now's just not the right moment to exit. So I'm hoping there's a more opportune moment to exit, in 2020 or 2021 when the equipment has better value. But I think it's a good thing. I'm still really optimistic and excited about Bitcoin, but I think the maturity around the landscape, I've been extremely surprised. If you would have told me in 2015, you're going to see industrial scale mining by serious people, I know I've invoked his name a million times, but the Bitmains and Peter Thiels of the world, and I know there's others, right? There's that big Canadian, one in Quebec or whatever that's 40 or 50 megawatts, and I've seen the news articles coming out on the facilities, and I would have said in 4 years we're going to see 50 megawatt facility. No way. You're not going to see. And then I was completely wrong, right? There's 100 megawatt facility. I've been blown away at the pace at which the scale has changed. And I think it's going to make it very hard for small time miners, because the people that are building up facilities like that have no middleman, and there's not room for a middleman. Right, the small time miner hosting companies like Frontier, not to bag on them because they've been great to me and they've been great people to work with, and I wish them all the best and I hope they do have success. And they are doing some decent sized implementations. There's people dropping 1 to 5 megawatts with them. I know that, but I think it's going to be hard for people that have a middleman. I think the people that can afford to buy a building, go direct to the power company and get power for 4.5 cents. It is possible. I know it's possible from what I've learned about the industry. I think it's possible to get less than that in certain places, right? You can't get that if you're going through somebody else. You just can't compete. So even if somebody like a Bitmain or, whoever is selling Bitcoin for operational expenses, their operational expenses are still so much lower than yours. You can't really be competitive. So, and then when you take into account that a lot of the mining is occurring in China and other countries that have not just lower power costs, but lower labor costs, I even question the fact
tariff,
lower everything. I really even question the ability.
And also, the miners are being made in China, and so they're one of the first people to get them online and hooked up and hashing too.
They're getting the very first ones, exactly, and that's super critical because I've described a miner to people like a wet rag, you squeeze, like an S17 Plus, right? If you get one right when it lands, the first one, right, in America, you get the first one in America, right? It's going to be a really wet rag, right? You squeeze it the tiniest bit, and water just starts coming out, right? But the longer you go, we've all squeezed a wet rag, right? You have to squeeze harder and harder and harder, and less comes out until there's just no amount of squeezing that's going to get anything out of it, right?
I like that analogy. I'm going to use that if you don't mind.
So time, like you're mentioning, time is of the essence, because if they get S17 pluses on a month before they even ship any to America, it doesn't matter. It's a little bit more ethereal than that, right? Because the model is actually the wet rag. So that S17 Plus has already been squeezed some,
Yeah.
And now they're shipping it to America, and it's already been squeezed a little bit, essentially. I mean, it's a new product, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It's like their ability to turn those things on and use them first gives them this competitive advantage that is hard to compete with, plus labor costs, plus tariff costs and taxes and all the other stuff, plus lower power costs. I really question even the guys that are making gigantic investments in the US and Canada. As much as I'd like to see the US be a leader in mining, because I think the centralization of Bitcoin mining in these other countries is not great for the ecosystem. It'd be better if it was decentralized across the globe. For the same reason that we're not making AirPods in America, we're not going to be making miners in here either, I don't think. And I think long term, a lot of these mining facilities are going to struggle even to compete, even the ones that are running their operational expenses directly. I think they're going to be like, let's just sell the building and move all this stuff to China, right? Like the guys that can afford to do that, right? Like the guys that are really rich and can afford to do that. Why would they not long term eventually realize that and do that and say, oh wow, I can get 3.5 cent power in Turkey and buy a building and build something out there, and the government's supportive of me because I'm hiring a bunch of their people. So and I'm doing a big enough deal I can talk to the government.
Right. Yeah, what we're hearing from people is that there are Chinese mining companies that are looking to move into the United States. Partly, for example, because it seems like every second month, China is either banning Bitcoin or they're unbanning it, or
right.
They're speaking something positive about it, and that so it's volatile from that standpoint. So yeah, I think. They might be thinking some of these same things that we're thinking, but just the opposite here.
Sure. No, it's interesting. It's interesting to think about for sure. Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I don't think any of us have a crystal ball. I mean, I think what's been surprising again for me is the scale, the pace of industrialization of the mining is what's been mind blowing to me. And that I think is what's hard for a small scale miner to compete with. And I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see, I think you certainly can still do it today, right? You can pick up some S17 or better miners, put them in a modestly priced facility, even something as high as 8 cents, and still be cash flow positive, right? So you can do it, even though Bitcoin's price sucks and difficulty is really high. You can still do it today. The question is, will that miner ever pay for itself if you're selling the Bitcoin for operational expenses? And that's going to rely entirely on how fast difficulty goes up and how fast price goes up. And that remains to be seen, right? I mean, we've seen the opposite happen since 2017, right? We've seen difficulty go up while price declines. And
yeah, that was bizarre. I still don't understand that.
I mean, a whole other thing that surprised me just talking about the actual equipment was one of the reasons I invested in a bunch of Silicon and Dragonmint stuff was, 7 nanometer stuff is like the latest, greatest stuff out there, right? That's stuff that Intel and AMD and NVIDIA are working on. I did not think anybody was going to come out with the 7 nanometer miner before this. I just didn't think it was going to happen. I'm like, I just bought the latest AMD graphics card just to mess around with, like the 5700 XT, and it's a 7 nanometer card. I'm like, sure. It just came out 60 days ago. Like, there's been S17s out for whatever, and there are 7. I just can't believe that industry was ahead of the GPU industry. I did not expect that in a second, right? I was like, so when the 10 nanometer stuff came out, I was like, oh, this is going to be the ticket for at least 4 years. I know Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA are going to come out with 7 nanometer stuff, but Bitmain's not going to be able to do that for at least 2, 3, or 4 years, right? And I was wrong. I was straight up wrong. So now I'm like, are they going to get the first 5 nanometer stuff? We all know that Intel and AMD and NVIDIA are all working on 5 nanometers, and we all know that somewhere between 3 and 5 nanometers is going to be the minimum, right? We know Moore's law is going to break, but are they going to be the first? They were basically.
It looks like it's a distinct possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. That blew me away. And I was so wrong about that. Had I been, again, not, the pace has just been mind boggling to me. Cause again, had I known that Bitmain was going to come out with 7 nanometer stuff, I wouldn't have bought any 10 nanometer stuff. I was totally not expecting that.
Right.
I was expecting them to come out with maybe a little bit better 10 nanometer stuff. I wasn't expecting them to just leapfrog 10 nanometers. That just totally shocked me.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
So we're coming to the end here, but any last advice or warnings that you have? Because I know this episode has been all about that. What do you have to say to the audience?
I think look, it's a summarization of what I've already said, but like now if you're interested in mining, now is actually a great time to get in the game, in my opinion.
I agree.
18 months or 24 months from now is probably a terrible time. So if you're listening to this podcast and we have a new all-time high, and that's what's gotten you interested in Bitcoin, in 2 years from now,
too late.
This is not a good situation, right? You're in the situation I was in. Learn from me. Don't buy overpriced equipment. Don't put it in overpriced facilities. Don't lose your shorts, right? Wait. There probably will be another opportunity. There's going to be the S19 or whatever the hell it is, and there's going to be another bear market, and you'll have an opportunity to pick up some of that vacant hosting space at low costs, and be patient. But if you're looking to get in the game now, I think now actually is a good time. Look for good values on the best equipment out there. I wouldn't buy anything under an S17. I buy S17 or S17e or S17 Plus in my personal opinion, or S17 Pro. I'd put it in the best possible price facility you can afford. And I'd make sure to have probably, in addition to the amount you're going to spend on miners, probably 6 months of your electrical costs in reserve, so that you can manage when you have to sell your Bitcoin. So you're not forced, your hand isn't forced to sell when you don't want to.
And don't sign a 5-year contract, right?
Yeah.
But, signing a 12-month contract is already a pretty big commitment. I think you're probably pretty safe if you sign a 12-month contract and you have 6 months in reserve. I would say you're probably safe enough. But, it's a risky and volatile game, and you should have reserves available to be able to manage that risk and volatility. And that was a big error I made, because I wanted to buy the most hardware I could, because it all looked really cash flow positive. And even today, like I said, it's cash flow positive right now. So I'd say if you want to get in the game, great, look at your budget and figure out what that balance is between having 3, 6, 9 months of reserve cash plus your equipment. That's a really good spot to be in, I think, to be able to mine effectively and potentially make money. You don't know for sure if you're going to make money, because we don't know what Bitcoin's price is going to be. Yeah. But, I think that's a good position to be in. My word of warning is, if you're, if and when, and I hope that there's a bull run, and I do think there will be one, the price of hardware is going to go up. Hosting space is going to evaporate. Hosting prices are going to go through the roof. And I think even if you have a ton of money, you don't want to lose it. That is not the time to start mining. Wait, and there's opportunity. There's opportunity in waiting. There was an opportunity to pick up $600 Dragon Mint T1s in 2018, and you would have made money, right? Yeah. You would have done well. And so there was opportunity to pick up stuff at a third the price of its new cost just 12 months prior. And so there may be an opportunity to buy used S17s in a couple of years, and squeeze the last bit of life out of them in cheap facilities, even though the S19
before it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so, Chad, thanks for your time. Yeah. And where can we find you online?
Well, I'm at ChadL2 at pretty much everywhere: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that kind of stuff. The handle is so silly, but it was I've been going all full circle all the way back to the beginning of the podcast. I've been in IT so long, I had an AOL account, right? So probably you guys did too. And so my AOL handle was ChadL2, because I couldn't get ChadL, and I just kept using it over and over and over. So it literally dates all the way back to an AOL CD-ROM.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, and we'll see you online.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chad. Take care. Bye.
This episode was sponsored by NovaBlock Mining Pool, and you can try their pool out. You can sign up on the top right of their website, sign up, and you can apply the coupon code, the invitation code, OFFORD18, OFFORD 18, for a permanent reduction in your mining fees down to 1.8%. So give that a shot right now, and reach out to Vincent.v@novablock.com.